And then there are 47 letters of support with reductions in supporting the reduction in traffic journeys and also the reduction in air pollution. And so from an office point of view, we have no objection in principle. There's no impact on the MOL, the design. There's no harm to the heritage assets. There is a tree that would be removed by the entrance, but would be replaced elsewhere within the site, and there's a condition to secure that. So from officer's perspective, it's visually acceptable. The loss of tree, as I mentioned, is not significant because it's being replaced. There's no adverse impact on the highways, and the highways team have no objections subject to the enforcement camera being installed. The applicant has agreed to pay for the installation of that. And our air quality colleagues have reviewed the proposals and are satisfied that the reduction in travel distances helps to improve air quality in this location. And there's a section 106 which secures the installation of the enforcement camera to ensure that vehicles don't turn left on Broomhouse Lane. So officers are recommending that the application be reapproved, and these are the reasons for recommendation reasons. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Rory, for your report. I believe we had a speaker that was registered who has waived their right to speak, or if you would like to speak, yeah? Anthony Moyes, yeah, please go ahead. If you just press the button on the right-hand side before you start speaking. Yeah, thank you very much.
All good? Yep. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Anthony Moyes, and I'm the Director of Communications at the Hurlingham Club. I'm here on behalf of the club to speak in support of our application to modify the entrance from Broomhouse Lane to facilitate two-way traffic, improving both entry and exit. Michael O'Dwyer, our Chief Executive, apologies for not being here today, able to attend due to being out of the country. This application forms part of our wider master plan, which is designed to enhance our facilities whilst preserving the natural environment and respecting the surrounding community. This project continues that ethos, offering a practical solution that benefits many of our members as well as many of our neighbours. The widening of the Broomhouse Lane gates will improve traffic flow across the club site, easing pressure on the main gate and reducing congestion on nearby roads. Additionally, it will align with the objectives of the Clean Air Scheme. Currently, when a car heading for Wandsworth Bridge leaves the club, it will travel briefly along Ranelagh Gardens, turn north, travelling the length of Napier Avenue, then turn east into Hurlingham Road, and then back south along Broomhouse Lane, passing the entrance to the club opposite Daisy Lane, before continuing south towards the Wandsworth Bridge. Our traffic survey identified that 119 such journeys are made each day, totalling over an estimated 54,000 kilometres. With the ability for cars to leave the club via the Broomhouse Lane gate, all those journeys with their associated emissions and congestion will be removed. We have listened closely to feedback throughout the process. In consultation with officers at Hammersmith and Fulham, we conducted an updated traffic survey using Motion, a leading independent consultancy, providing expert advice in travel and traffic planning, and engaged proactively with the local community. We have been consulting with our nearest neighbours on Daisy Lane for a couple of years, and most recently arranged two wider consultation sessions, one in person and one online, to maximise accessibility and attendance. These sessions drew valuable input from attendees, enabling open and constructive dialogue. We've taken care to address concerns raised by residents, including measures to minimise potential disruption, improve signage, traffic monitoring, and enforcement as outlined in the section 106 detailed earlier. We remain committed to ensuring these conversations are two-way, fostering collaboration rather than imposing selective solutions. Ultimately, this proposal is about balancing progress with responsibility. By streamlining access to the club and reducing reliance on residential streets, we aim to enhance traffic efficiency and contribute meaningfully to the borough's clean air scheme. The Hurlingham Club is committed to being a considerate neighbour and proactive contributor to our community's well-being, as the work of the Hurlingham Club Foundation has proved so effectively in recent years. And we believe this project represents a significant step towards these goals. We're grateful for your consideration for our application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thanks for your time. Great. Now we'll move on to committee members' questions for officers. And who would like to start the questioning? Any questions yet? Councillor Schwarzenberg, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I suppose I had two observations and a question. First of all, thank you for including the data in the report pack about the estimated savings in carbon emissions, estimated to be equivalent to 5 households per year. I think that's really important. It helps us understand what the benefits of it are. I wanted to talk to you, however, about traffic. Not a question, just a comment, but the assessment made on a day that a bridge was closed and a school holiday, you think, well, why not also choose Christmas Day? Would have given a better result. Why are you convinced that the traffic actually won't increase from that?
I'll start off with, so I've got my highways colleague here, but essentially, when the initial submissions were made, because the bridge was closed and because it was during school holidays, it basically underestimated the traffic impacts of the proposals. So by doing it at a time when it's a normal period and not an unusual period, not a Christmas time, not a summer holiday, it's the busiest time, if you like. So it was during May, and it's more indicative and more realistic data that was collated. And it's actually data that's consistent with our own, because we have our own cameras as a council, which are enforcement cameras, and we use those to sort of assess the merits of the information that was provided to us, and they corroborated.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you don't think that this provides more facilities for drivers to go into the club, therefore increasing the likelihood of people resorting to cars?
No, because I mean, the pattern of movement to and from the club would remain the same. The main difference would be is that the distribution of that movement has changed, and because it means that vehicles will not have the emphasis of using the west gate on the Putney side, they would be able to revert back to the eastbound route, which would avoid having to go around Hurlingham Road and then back up through Broomhouse Lane, which actually reduces the distance that they need to cover to get back to the same point, which in short means that they're doing much shorter journeys, and then overall the same number of journeys are being made. So it's just that there are shorter journeys, which means less pollution.
Thank you. And what's the deterrence for preventing people to turn left?
So so I don't have access to the presentation, have I? Right, okay, so I'll just show you one slide. So hopefully you can see this slide, which shows the proposed arrangement. And there's two things I would draw your attention to. There's this red line here is the existing curb arrangement. If you were to leave from the Broomhouse Lane entrance, and opposite that you've got Daisy Lane. So the curb line would be reconfigured to basically prevent people turning left easily in a sort of physical way. Also, there would be some signage, which is highlighted in red here, which is basically telling people, except for cycles, that they can't turn left. Also, there's signage within the club telling people that they can't turn left. And in addition to that, there would be a camera installed on this corner, which would monitor vehicles as they leave the club, and any vehicles turning left would be issued with a ticket. So it's in their interest to turn right, and the ticket's £130 at the moment. It may go up. So, yeah.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Pascoe-Tiberi.
Thank you very much. Just on the traffic counting system, obviously there's a possibility of drawing an inference that this is steady state traffic, but we all know that hospitality venues don't work like that. Typically people come in at an earlier point of the day than they leave. Has any consideration been done or studies been done about the impact of traffic at peak times for that?
Yeah, I mean, these studies were done over the course of a period, I think, starting at 7 a.m. in the morning and going up to 8 a.m. in the evening, so 8 p.m. in the evening. And also, this is an average. So, they're going to be peaks and troughs during the course of any normal day. And the club, there's a Section 106 legal agreement, which is in play at the moment, still is not affected by this, which limits the number of large events to the club to 6 events during a year. So that would still be in place.
Sure, but if you go to the club at a weekend, it is absolutely rammed, and you have an awful lot of people there. So it's likely they'll be all leaving at roughly a similar time and all arriving at roughly a similar time. What do the peaks look like?
In the report, I'll show you that. So on page 26 of the report, you've got a sample of the roads that were used to assess traffic counts, and there's table 1 highlighted and there's table 2 highlighted, but within table 1 there's a average traffic count for midweek, and then the table below that within table 1 is the average traffic count for weekend. So for the same roads, and you can see that weekend, the number of vehicles eastbound and westbound is actually much lower than the figures during the week. Similarly, if you look at the automated number recognition system that was used as part of the survey, slightly different roads, but again, all within the same sort of catchment, but significantly, for example, Ranelagh Gardens, which is where the main entrance was, eastbound and westbound, you can see that those numbers are 474 and 798 average during the week. And at weekends, there's the same figures are lower at 387 and 594. So there is a difference that generally it's lower during the weekend. So, yeah.
Thanks very much. My point was about times of day rather than average across the day. But I'll accept that given the size of the numbers. One final question from me is: are you aware of any? I hesitate to go campaigns, but pushes being made by the club to encourage members and visitors to choose non-car modes of transport for getting there?
Yeah, they have a travel plan which is established, and that's part of something that gets reviewed periodically when any new development comes forward. But that's not necessarily the case here because it's changing the vehicular access. But certainly, there historically have been travel plans which will be submitted with an application. I know that one of the previous applications, which was for a much larger development on the site, included a travel plan, but that's not the case here.
And would that be made to the council or communicated to members? Are you aware?
That travel plan was communicated to members at the time the application was made, and we would have reviewed that as highways officers.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? No further questions? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to voting. First, we'll move on to voting on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, and that's on page 9 of the report. Councillor Chabot-Verdier will be voting for, against, or not voting.
For.
Councillor Melton. Councillor Souslous.
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibere.
For.
I'll also be voting for. So that recommendation has been approved. And now we move on to recommendation 2, which is also on page 9. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Melton. For. Councillor Souslous.
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibere.
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we move on to item 5, which is Netherwood Place. And can the presenting officer, Anissa Aboud, introduce the report whenever you're ready? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The next item on the agenda is Netherwood Place, land to rear of 17A Netherwood Road. Your attention is drawn to the addendum, which contains a number of corrections. More specifically, a new delivery and servicing plan condition has been added, and under the heads of terms, the reinstatement of the pavement is also included. The proposal seeks permission for the demolition of the existing auto workshop building, use class B2, and erection of a part 1, part 2 story plus basement building with a communal terrace at upper ground floor level to provide 6 2-bedroom, 2 3-bedroom, and 1 1-bedroom self-contained flats and associated landscaping. The application site comprises a triangular-shaped parcel of land located to the rear of properties on Netherwood Road, Anley Road to the north, and Shepherd's Bush Road to the west. The site is currently occupied by an auto repair centre known as Netherwood Autos and is a fully enclosed backland plot. The site is located within a predominantly residential area. There are a number of hotels located along Shepherd's Bush Road, some of which back onto the site, and Melrose Conservation Area lies adjacent to the site. The image on screen shows the aerial image of the site. These are images showing the existing site photos with views taken from number 17 Netherwood Road looking onto the site. The photo on screen shows the site entrance from Netherwood Road. The image on screen shows the existing and proposed massing with the comparative illustration of the existing and proposed massing to the right. As members will see, the proposed massing is predominantly contained within the existing massing of the auto repair centre. The image on screen shows the proposed lower ground floor. The new units are arranged along the site boundary, creating a communal courtyard in the centre. Each flat would benefit from private amenity space. The image on screen shows the proposed upper ground floor with, again, the communal courtyard area in the centre. This is the proposed first floor plan. Again, the image on screen shows the layout of the first floor plan, including the 3-bed 6 unit. Yep. This is the proposed site plan and the roof plan. As you can see, the proposed development would also benefit from green roofs or a green roof. The proposed development will maintain a similar eaves height to that of the existing structure along the majority of the boundary. This would minimize overshadowing and prevent any reduction in outlook to the adjacent properties. The dashed line denotes the outline of the existing building. That's this line along here. And reducing the site level by approximately 1.2 meters has allowed the proposed structure of 2 to 3 stories to sit within the envelope of the existing garage. Any second-story accommodation would be contained within the pitch of the roof, which is also set back from the site boundary, also pitching away, helping to reduce the impact to the adjacent properties. The existing outlook of the properties to the west of the site along Shepherd's Bush Road has been improved or maintained in comparison to the existing industrial building, again by pitching the roof on the top floor, as indicated on the section on screen. The height of the proposed building acts as a considerable decrease in height compared to that of the existing, which again is denoted by this dashed line. The proposed development has been designed so that primary aspect windows face into the site so that neighbouring properties aren't subject to increased overlooking. The proposed north elevation section plan shows the relationship between the proposed development and the residential properties along Anley Road to the north. The dashed line again denotes the outline of the existing building. As you can see, the proposed development would sit comfortably within the envelope of the existing building, and no habitable room windows are proposed facing north. Instead, roof lights provide high levels of natural light to the rear of the proposed buildings. 2 secondary kitchen windows are proposed on the first floor, which would be obscure glazed, which we will look into in more detail. The image on screen shows the proposed west elevation section across the rear gardens of Shepherd's Bush Road. Again, the dashed line denotes the outline of the existing building. Similarly, the image on screen shows more closely the relationship between the proposed development and number 32, Shepherd's Bush Road. Given the difference in levels and the existing boundary wall, there would be little opportunity for increased overlooking to these properties from the proposed winter balcony. That's this right here. As I mentioned, these are the 2 proposed obscure glazed windows serving secondary windows serving the kitchen. facing Anley Road. Again, the proposed development, you can see the outline of the existing building, and it shows more closely the relationship between number 2 Anley Road and the proposed development. And again, this is a closer look at that obscure glazed window. Apologies, there seems to be a bit of a lag. These are the proposed development would be finished in high quality materials, including London stock brick and a pale grey aluminium timber window frames and a zinc profile roof with a green roof on the flat roof elements. And the final details would be secured by condition. These are the proposed 3D visuals of the site, with Netherwood Road to the south, Anley Road to the north, and Shepherd's Bush Road to the west. Again, another viewpoint of the 3D visuals. And again, these are the 2 obscure glazed windows facing number 2 Anley Road across here. Again, another viewpoint of the 3D visuals, this time with Anley Road to the east, Shepherd's Bush Road to the west, Shepherd's Bush Road to the north, and Netherwood Road to the west. In terms of the key issues relate to the loss of the B2 Auto Repair Centre and change to residential use. This is considered to be acceptable. The existing auto repair centre is a low employment use, and the property has been marketed for over 10 years for alternative industrial use without success. Residential use in this sustainable location is therefore considered to be acceptable. In terms of design, the proposed massing is considered to be acceptable. Officers consider the proposal to be a visual improvement to the existing structures on site, and no harm is identified to the adjacent Melrose Conservation Area. In terms of consultation responses, 7 objections have been received from 5 different addresses on Anley Road. These are detailed in paragraph 2.1 of the report on page 47 of the agenda report. Some of the concerns have already been addressed, but to summarise, the objections mainly relate to outlook, privacy, massing, overdevelopment, noise, and fire safety. In terms of massing, officers would argue the massing is comparable to the existing auto repair centre and in many cases reduced, particularly in relation to the Anley Road properties. The layout has been orientated to mitigate harm to privacy, windows designed to prevent harm to Anley Road. In terms of daylight sunlight, these are compliant with the BRE standards and there are no infringements. A fire safety statement has been prepared by a qualified fire safety engineer, which has been reviewed by by building control officer and considered to be acceptable for planning purposes. The proposed development would create high quality accommodation in the form of 9 new homes, including 2 family-sized units. The proposal would be car-free and would be liable for a mayoral sale of £4,160 and a local sale of £10,400. Finally, turning to the heads of terms, the proposed development would warrant an air quality monitoring fee, a construction logistics plan monitoring fee. The proposal again would be car-free and require a Section 278 agreement to fund the removal of the existing crossover on Netherwood Road and reinstatement of pavement. A financial contribution of £400,000 has also been secured for public realm, environmental improvements and affordable housing. And again, for these reasons, officers recommend the application for approval subject to the conditions listed in the report and the changes noted in the addendum, as well as successful completion of the legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. Now, I believe we have 2 speakers, Mr. Malhotra and Mr. Young, both speaking in support of the application. If you would like, I understand you've waived your right to speak. Is that right? Yeah? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to questions for officers. And who would like to start the questions? Any questions for officers? Yes, Councillor Schwartz-Verdier, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anissa. It was a great presentation. You mentioned in your pack that a previous consent was granted in 2018. Could you tell us what the main differences are between that grant and the current application?
Share. No,
Thanks.
and then share.
In terms of the planning history, yes, there was a consent granted in June 2018, and again that was for 9 units. The main difference between the scheme that we have in front of us today and the 2018 scheme is predominantly the housing mix. One of the 2-bed 3 units has been changed to a 1-bed 1 to align more with our housing mix policy. However, in terms of the actual 2018 consent, officers have given it little weight, as it predates the current local plan, and it's an expired consent. So when we're looking at the current application, we're looking at it with fresh eyes, giving little weight to the previous consent. But there is a history of granting residential use on this site.
Thank you, that is very helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Nope, no further questions. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to voting. Firstly, on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, and that is on page 33 of the report. Councillor Chevot-Verdier.
4.
Councillor Melton.
4.
Councillor Souslis.
4.
Councillor Pascu-Touberay.
Agreed.
I'll also be voting for, so that recommendation has been approved. And now we move on to recommendation 2, which is also on page 33. Councillor Chevot-Verdier.
4.
Councillor Melton.
4.
Councillor Souslis.
4.
Councillor Pascu-Touberay.
4.
And I'll also be voting for, so that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Okay, now we move on to item 6, which is 14 Ellingham Road. And Neil Egerton, whenever you're ready, please introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As stated, the application relates to 14 Ellingham Road, a 2-storey property, residential property situated on the west side of Ellingham Road, a mid-terrace. The proposal is for the erection of a rear roof extension, which involves an increase in the ridge height to match the adjoining property at number 12, erection of a rear extension at 2nd floor level on top of the existing back addition to the full depth of the back addition, a single-storey rear extension to the side of the existing back addition. There was a planning permission granted in last year for all of those elements, with the exception that on top of the back addition there was a pod extension for part of the depth, followed with a roof terrace to the rear. So this looks to change that essentially. This image shows the application property number in red. The site is not within a conservation area. This is an image of Ellingham Road Terrace, part of the Ellingham Road Terrace. Number 14 is highlighted there. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag with the cursor. Excuse me. As you can see from the photograph there, the roof extensions are a fairly common theme along the site. This is the view from the rear. Number 14 is here. So there's a roof extension at number 6, number 12, number 16 and 18 as shown here, and an existing small pod extension also to number 12. It's a slightly wider view of the terrace. I mean, the background number 20 showing up as 22 in this photograph. The way that Google Earth numbers it, but what's shown as 22 is number 20, and the one above that is number 22. Planning permission was granted on appeal last June for a full depth pod extension at number 20. And then number 22, a separate application was approved in October last year, for a matching pod extension. I've got an image here taken, which you can just see the rear of those pod extensions, sort of where the cursor is, that they have been implemented and completed. That's the front elevation of 14 Ellingham. So there's a raised ridge height on the adjoining property, which the roof extension would match as per the previous permission. You see here the front elevation drawing, that the ridge height will be raised by around about 280 millimeters, shot back and to match the height of the neighbouring property. And then just the ground floor plans, you can see here single story side extension as per the extant permission proposed again. No real change at first floor level. And then at roof level, you have the roof extension here, providing the master bedroom and ensuite bathroom. And then to the rear, you have the pod extension, which is a pitched roof, mansarded roof on the rear and side elevation here, providing an additional bedroom and an ensuite bathroom. Previously, the pod extension, which came to around about here, I have an image further, provided an office with a terrace beyond. You can see this is the rear elevation. You can see the mansard roof sort of sloped here, side extension, and the red lines sort of indicate the impact on neighbouring windows, that clear 45-degree line to get light in there. There is a ground floor window here, which is at high level due to the neighbours have got a single story extension built here as well. This shows a comparison to what was approved last year. So you have the pod extension and then roof terrace beyond, which has got 1.7 metre high obscure glazed screens. As a result of this development, you would have the mansard, say, slope back at 70 degrees from the rear and side elevations. And effectively, what you would gain, the dotted line here is the existing pod extension, and then this lower dotted line is the height of the screening that was approved for the extension. So this additional element would be created, which is around about 90 centimetres higher than the existing approved screening. And then this obviously shows you the small pod extension that is in existence next door. Officers have assessed the application and are comfortable with the proposals and feel that in light of the appeal decision, which is a material consideration, and having taken into account the concerns raised by the local residents, which are summarised in the report, that recommend the permission be granted subject to the conditions listed below in the report, and that the second recommendation, obviously the Director of Planning and Property, after consultation with Assistant Director of Legal Services and the Chair of the Planning, be authorised to make any such minor changes to the proposed conditions. I'd also flag up on the addendum, there's just a minor typo with regards to the applicant's name, which is to be corrected, and there were two comments listed under neighbours' comments that weren't picked up by the system, so they're added. Thank you.
Okay, Neil, thank you very much. We have a number of speakers that are registered. Firstly, we have Matthew Keeler, Emily Facci, Hannah Wyatt, and Sue Fenimore, all speaking in objection, and you have 5 minutes between you, however you'd like to split that up. If you want to nominate one person to speak for 5 minutes, or you want to split that up between you, you can do so. If you'd just like to come to the front there, and the mics are prepared. If you press the button on the right-hand side, it will go green. And if you could introduce yourselves as well before you speak. And as I say, you have 5 minutes between you. Thanks very much.
Yes, hello. My name is Matt Keeler. I'm a resident of 16 Ellingham Road. I'm also an architect. I've lived there and practiced there for 30 years. I'd just like to mention Sue Fenimore is not well, so she won't be attending. We're going to split it up. I'm going to be the principal speaker just because I have a bit of technical knowledge. Okay. So this revised application is a result of the recent full-length rear wing addition to the end of terrace house at number 20 and 22. That was a result of a non-determination appeal by number 20. Whilst that probably sets a precedence for the other end of terrace properties, it does not follow that it sets precedence for the mid-terrace properties, which are quite different, and you need to appreciate those differences. The mid-terrace properties have a usable garden area of about half of the end of terrace properties. The end of terrace properties are on larger plots, they're a metre wider, they have shorter wings. The mid-terrace properties, the wings are close together. I understand that the first application that my neighbour made, I actually supported because it complied with the planning policy at the time with the 50% of plan area of the rear wing. This is 7.2 metres long. Please stop calling it a pod extension. A pod is a small extension. It's not a 7.2 metre third level addition to a rear wing. That's overdevelopment. That has a big impact on our light and outlook amenity. We have a small garden. It's 700, unique in the street because it's 700 metres lower than our neighbour's property. That's this table height. Our neighbour's land is this table height higher than us, and therefore their rear wing is too. We actually made an application in 2001 for a rear addition on the back wing. This was based on a precedence on the other side of the street that was set back 1.5 metres from the end of the rear wing. Nonetheless, it was rejected. We went to appeal. The appeal inspector said, when I visited number 14 Ellingham Road, it became clear that a number of principal rooms receive a limited amount of daylight and sunlight. In addition, I consider the outlook from some of those rooms is already dominated by the high rear extensions. I find that I'm in agreement with the statement and justification for S 12.4 of the UDP, which states that the narrow widths, lengths, and the height of the back addition produce conditions which are already at the margins of acceptability. We accepted this decision because that's how the system works. And over the years, I've come around to agreeing with local authority that the 50% of plan area is reasonable trade-off between additional space versus the effects on the neighbour amenity. And that's why I supported it. There is no single precedence for a full-length mid-terrace property extension. I would expect the local authority to defend their 50% policy. Key principles HS 4, 6, and 7, that's what they're there for. If you don't defend it, that's gone. It's not fit for purpose, in my view. If you're minded to accept the principle of an additional length beyond that, and you're not going to defend your 50%, then the consistent thing to do would be to allow an extension that's consistent with the historic precedents at number 11 and 13. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Emily Ficini, and I live with my family of 5 as direct neighbours to number 14. 18 years ago, we added the very small pod mentioned to the flat roof at the rear, which I use as a professional space. My first point is, for the last 18 years, I've run my successful and busy illustration business from that small pod. I sit at the window for 8 to 10 hours each weekday drawing. Please, can you imagine what it will be like for me if a 2.6 meter high extension is built to my left that will block 50% of my outlook, a view that is currently across trees and gardens, and which will be, if you give this permission, a solid wall. My light will be drastically affected, and I can tell you now my mental welfare will be as well, and therefore my work. My studio is so small that in practice it only has a single aspect, and the second window is designed to provide ventilation. This application is far from being respectful towards my studio, as claimed, just as it wasn't earlier in the 2023 application for the 50% extension with the roof terrace, which now sounds like a blessing compared to this. My second point is our garden is small, as Matt said, and the added height of the new extension would make it feel like we're living at the bottom of a well. My third point is we would not copy this type of extension on our house, as we would not want to oppose this on our other neighbour at number 10. I understand the need for making room for their growing family. They already have been given permission to do a loft conversion, a kitchen extension, and this 50% roof extension. Is this further planning really necessary?
Hello, just briefly. My name's Hannah Wyatt, and my husband and I live at number 18. So in effect, next door to the number 20, where they have this full length pod, or really a full length extension. We felt really let down that this was allowed to happen by the council, and we think it was on the basis of mistakes. Firstly, we think they were given the incorrect advice about the 50% policy. And secondly, the failure of the case officer to request an extension of time meant that they were able to appeal on the grounds of non-determination. So it sort of feels like it kind of slipped through. So as a result, I actually live next door to one of these extended extensions. And I can tell you it is overbearing, and it significantly impacts our light and outlet. So this affects our kitchen, our dining area, our living area, my husband's office, and our garden. So for example, I can no longer see sky from my kitchen window, which I would have been able to with only a 50% extension. It's a dominating structure that has changed the lived experience and the enjoyment of our home. Planning, in my view, sort of messed up on this. 50% would have been absolutely fine. And I worry that this current application is in danger of compounding those areas and then allowing the whole street to be overdeveloped. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. If you'd like to return to your seats, thank you very much. That's fine, yeah. Thank you very much. Now we have Charles Kaidan, who is the applicant, speaking in support of the application. Whenever you're ready, you also have 5 minutes. So yeah, if you'd like to come to the front, or and Kate Matthews, my apologies. Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Charles Keelan, the owner of 14 Ellingham Road, with my partner, Rebecca Steinfeld. I'd like to start by thanking Zirong Lee, Neil Egerton, and the council planning team for considering our plans. We acknowledge that the planning officers have recommended approval after a careful and detailed assessment. In a moment, I'll hand over to Kate Matthews on my right, an experienced planning expert and partner at First Plan. But first, I'd just like to briefly share with councillors why we've developed these plans on a more personal and family level. My partner, Rebecca, and I both work in the voluntary sector for the public good and work from home most of the week. We have a family with 3 young children. We're trying to do our best, despite the cost of living, the cost of working in the charity sector, and the cost of moving, which we want to avoid. We want to create a family home in the neighbourhood inspired by and almost identical to the plans that you approved last year for other families, including those at number 20 and 22 Ellingham Road, just a few doors down. Now, Kate will explain in a moment why these changes are justified in planning terms, but I want to make the point that we simply want to increase space at home for our children, so each of our daughters can have a bedroom of their own, and so that we can have one shared or home office to help us manage the demands of work and childcare. These plans will allow us to continue contributing to our local community for I hope will be many years to come. Our children attend local schools, Greenside and West London. I'm in regular contact with Cleaner Greener to keep our area well maintained. I personally work with Councillor Rowan Ree, the Willett team and the local Neighbourhood Watch to combat serious drug-related issues in our street and area. Councillor Ree and I have also worked together with the Council's Parks and Leisure Department on a SUD scheme outside Greenside School as part of those wider efforts. I'm not, maybe I will be one day, a councillor. I simply do it because I want to be a decent citizen and neighbour. And I think supporting our reasonable proposal sends a signal to families like ours that there is space to settle and grow and similarly make a positive contribution. We'd much rather do that than face the cost and stress of moving away. For that reason, we've worked really hard and spent considerable time and resource to present plans which balance our family's needs to develop our home while respecting the neighbours' needs for privacy and amenity and comply with planning policies you've heard from Neil. And now to talk about those policies, I want to hand over to our planning expert, Kate Matthews, to brief you on its technical aspects.
Thank you. This application follows a permission which was granted by this committee in November 2023. The consent remains extant and the only difference is to the second floor roof extension. The extant consent included a half-depth extension, but also a glazed balustrade surrounding the rest of the second floor roof, which would be 1.7 metres high, effectively enclosing the whole roof area. Whilst the approved scheme at number 14 was being considered last year, there was an appeal decision at number 20 for a full second floor roof extension, which was approved. The extension was approved by the planning inspector in isolation, coming forward by itself, and number 22, after that appeal decision, then applied for their consent. When considering the plans for number 20, the inspector commented that its sloping sides and natural slate cladding would differentiate it visually from the 2 stories below. Furthermore, the lower floor level of the rear element would result in a roof of a mansard being only a little higher than the eaves of the main part of the house. The design was therefore considered to have an acceptable impact on the character of the area, despite considering the current local plan and key principles. The design before you tonight is very similar to what the inspector was assessing in the same terrace. The scheme proposes the same natural slate with sloping sides to differentiate it. The proposed roof is slightly above the eaves and is significantly below the ridge height. The appeal decision is therefore highly relevant. It's not only number 20 and now 22, but there are in fact a whole range of roof extensions in the area, including at numbers 9, 13, 15 and 17. Some of these are mid-terrace properties. Furthermore, when compared to the approved scheme of number 14 and the revised scheme before you tonight, we consider that the new scheme is visually more attractive because it no longer has the vertical boxy glazed screening as previously proposed. In relation to the impact on neighbours, the proposals do not conflict with key principle HS7 because none of the windows impacted form a sole window to a habitable room. All the habitable rooms affected have another window. There is arguably some impact on the outlook of number 12. However, this is to a small room which does have another large window to the side of it, and it will still retain a good open aspect as reported in the committee reports. The impact should therefore be considered acceptable. In respect of number 16, the ground floor of this property is extended and open plan, and at first floor the study has an additional window to the rear. The roof slopes away from this property, and again the impact should be considered acceptable. The extension is no deeper than the existing closet wing, and therefore in relation to the impact on the garden, the slope away will again ensure an acceptable impact. There are no windows or roof lights proposed which face numbers 12 or 16. Overall, the scheme complies with the planning policy aims to make efficient use of the site whilst complementing the character of the area and respecting the residential amenity of neighbours. The extent scheme at the site and the appeal decision at number 20 are strong material considerations which weigh in favour of the scheme. We therefore respectfully request that planning permission is granted.
And I just end by just making some very brief concluding comments to say, as Kate Matthews has just submitted, we've complied with all the planning policies, sought and followed the planning officer's guidance from start to finish. We have showed good neighbourliness. We've at least tried to, by discussing our plans with our neighbours ahead of time, ensuring our designs are reasonable and proportionate. Number 12 and indeed 16 and 18 can extend if they wish, and we would not object to them doing so. And I would just add that it seems a little bit harsh for neighbours to be resisting applications that they themselves made in 2001. And I'd also acknowledge that planning and developments have moved on. And I think we have to work on the basis of the planning decisions that have been made, including the ones a year ago, which have then led to our own application. So ultimately, these are modest changes to future-proof our family home, support the needs of our young children within our means as they grow up. And we therefore respectfully ask you to please follow the planning officer's recommendation this evening and approve what we consider to be a reasonable application. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you very much, both. Yeah, if you'd just like to turn the mic off and then return to your seats. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Okay, now we can move on to questions for officers. There's quite a lot to get through there. I'll start the questions with the point that was raised by some of the objectors. If any of the officers or perhaps legal can come in on this. So I think a point was made that if we're considering the appeal decision, there is a difference between an end of terrace versus mid terrace. And can anyone clarify if that is indeed correct? If we should think of it that way, and that can be taken into consideration in that way. If anyone can clarify.
Through the chair, Matt Butler, Assistant Director of Development Management. Yes, it's each one has to be determined on its own merit. So inevitably, each residential property is going to have different contexts, and in this case, there is, and we've taken that into account in our assessment. But the appeal decision is a material consideration, and we have to consider that against this application, while bearing in mind the differences between the two properties, or the three properties indeed in this case. So that has been accounted for. We haven't just simply taken the inspector's decision and applied it here. We've applied it in the context of the differences between the sites.
Sure, thank you. So just to clarify, if the committee were to refuse this application and the applicant were to take it to appeal, is there a chance that it's in a different part of the terrace? Could that influence the inspector's decision, given that an end of terrace property was approved or won at appeal?
Through the chair, if I'm understanding you correctly, Chair, yes, I mean, you're looking at this particular application, so you're not bound by the inspector's decision on the other application sites. They are a material consideration, as I said, and hopefully we've applied that clearly in our committee report to you in relation to how we've applied it in this instance. If not, then we can certainly field more questions on that now, but it's at the committee's discretion to take a different view to the inspector if that's based on sound planning material reasons. Does that help? Is that?
Yeah, thank you. Would anyone else like to legal or satisfied?
No, I think the officers have dealt with it correctly. Yes, you can depart, provided that you can distinguish differences between what the inspector looked at and what you're looking at today.
Okay, thank you. Yes, any other questions? Councillor Chabot-Berdier.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it could be helpful to get perhaps the slides back on for the committee's interest. But whilst we get the slides, please, I did have a question around some of the representations. So there's mention of precedents in number 11 and 13. Could you tell us about that, please?
Sorry, just want to get that image. So yes, I mean, you can see it's a limited image here. We've got of 11, 13 and 15. You can see the rear roof extensions. But I do not have the details of that as a part. I mean, I think the fact that there's extensions on that side of the road would not necessarily have a precedent on the opposite side, on the opposite side of the road here. But I don't have any more detailed image of that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. There was a mention of a disagreement around a time extension. Could you tell us about that? It was in one of the representations of the people against the proposal. It was mentioned that there's a failure to agree on time extension.
I believe that was in reference to the appeal at number 20. Sorry. I mean, yes, the application was not determined within a time frame. Therefore, the applicant appealed against non-determination. But I mean, it was unfortunate. There were a lot of discussions going on with the applicant at the time on that, trying to negotiate whether we could get any changes or not. And the applicants took the decision that they weren't prepared to negotiate any further and submitted the appeal against non-determination, which we then determined that or put forward our case to the planning inspector that had we been enabled to determine the application, we had recommended refusal on grounds of its impact on the character and appearance of the area and the impact on the neighbouring properties, both grounds which the planning inspector did not agree with and therefore allowed the appeal.
Thank you, Neil. So that sort of takes me to my next point. On page 74 of the report, you say to us, I'll read the extract. Whilst the council would normally resist full depth extension on top of back additions, in this context, officers acknowledged a recent planning inspection appeal decision of number 20 Ellingham Road and a subsequent approval of a similarly scaled extension of number 22 Ellingham Road. So does that mean that therefore, I mean, it's already been said, but can you confirm that that is a material consideration, that both the application granted at a neighbouring property as well as the planning inspectorate decision?
I think, yes, that they are both material considerations that have to be taken into account. The approval at number 22 followed the grant of the appeal for number 20, and there were adjoining properties with matching extensions. We certainly felt we would not be able to oppose that particular application, and both of those are their material considerations, as has been said by Mr. Butler. We don't have to follow that necessarily, but it is something that officers have to consider as material.
So to understand it clearly, if there weren't these material considerations, you would have advised us to refuse that application, but because the planning inspectorate sets a decision with a similar scheme, therefore you recommend it to be approved.
Through the chair, I think it's more appropriately put that we had to give significant material weight to the recent appeal decision. We'd have to consider there were significant differences between the two properties and the nature of the extensions and proximity and so forth to neighbours and windows and outlook that would justify us taking a different position to the inspectorate. We acknowledge there are differences, but we didn't feel those differences were such that it would lead to unacceptable harm to neighbouring amenity. Therefore, we felt the weight of the inspector's decision was significant, or certainly applied similarly to this situation, and therefore it was justified in reaching a similar decision.
And is there any way we can deep dive on those differences? Sorry, I'm sort of pushing, but the math has just mentioned the differences between number 20 scheme and number 14. What are the differences?
Sorry, the differences are, I mean, the two 20 and 22 are sort of both end of terrace properties with an adjoining back addition. So they, in that respect, the application property here is one of a pair, where there's, say, the existing small pod extension there. They'd be looking to come out here. And it has been previously pointed out that there is a height difference. The road, you can see on this image here, this is number 16, their back addition here is that level. The back addition on this is slightly higher because the road slopes. Therefore, there is a height difference between 14 and 16 in terms of where the back addition is. I mean, officers have still taken that into account and assessed on the impact we consider it has on the windows at number 16 and felt that was acceptable. Likewise, number 12 does have this small pod extension, which is a little studio, and it's at the same height. However, in that respect, because the windows to the rear, and then there is a window to the flank elevation as well, it was considered that that room would get satisfactory light. I think I've got a photograph. I mean, there's two main windows to the rear of this, or two joined windows to the rear of that pod extension, which the left-hand one looking out and the right-hand one, and then there's a further window then on the flank elevation, which provides light into the room. Officers considered, that impact we felt was acceptable.
So sorry, to go back on the pictures about the window, the second picture you've shown us, this is, we're in number 12 there, aren't we? No, 16, sorry. This is number 12.
Number 12, so in the pod extension, and that's the window in the flank elevation. I can show you that again in the aerial photograph. You can see the pod extension. There's the two window to the rear here, and then the window in the flank elevation. So officers were satisfied that would still get a reasonable level of light, even with the full depth extension there.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful.
Okay, any further questions? No further questions. Something else that was mentioned by sorry, we can't take any questions or comments on the floor, I'm afraid. Another one of the objectors mentioned about the impact on sunlight and daylight into a room that they work out of for 8 to 10 hours a day. Can you give us any assessment of that or any comments on that?
Yeah, that is this pod extension, which is a small studio that the neighbours at number 12 neighbour at number 12 works from. Officers still consider that there would be reasonable levels of sunlight and light to that room, even with the proposal. I mean, if we go back to the photographs, I mean, there is quite a... So
that is that room? That's what you said? Okay,
so it's quite open, to the rear, and then on the flank elevation, again, there's very little blocking light for that. So officers were satisfied in that respect.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a good clarification. Thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Pascal-Touberry.
Very much, just a quick one. One of the arguments made is that the end of terrace houses have gardens that are twice as big in terms of usable terms as the mid-terrace houses, which is apparently material. I can't quite see that from the plan or from aerial photos. So I was wondering if you could comment on the difference in terms of garden space between the end and the mid-terrace houses.
Yeah, I think if you look at the OS map here, the two end of terrace ones do have slightly bigger gardens and slightly smaller back additions. Officers still feel, there's still got a reasonable sized gardens on these properties, and they would still get reasonable sunlight to those gardens. Certainly, as the sun, this is sun would obviously sweep round in this direction, so sunlight and everything would still be provided to the garden areas. So I didn't think that the extension with its sloped roof and limited height, that it would have a significant impact on sunlight to the gardens.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions or comments? No? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to voting. Firstly, we'll vote on whether recommendation 1 is agreed, and that's on page 68 of the report. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Souslus.
For.
Councillor Pascu-Touberay.
For.
I'll also be voting for. So recommendation 1 has been approved. Now we move on to recommendation 2, which is also on page 68. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Souslus.
For.
Councillor Pascu-Touberay.
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thank you. Now we move on to item 7, which is pavement on Sedan Road, adjacent to 547551 Fulham Road. And Roy, whenever you're ready, please introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is an application for essentially a market stall, temporary market stall, on match days, home match days for when Chelsea Football Club have a match. And it would be in use for 3 hours before a match and 2 hours after a match. There has been history on the site for a previous pitch on the same site. More recently, a 13-month permission on this site for a hot food stall, which is what's proposed here. In fact, it's just regularising what's there at the moment. This is the a site plan which shows a site highlighted in red in the middle, and if you like, this boundary line of the town centre goes down the middle of Sedan Road, so everything to the left is in the town centre, if you like. And it's opposite the shopping centre and the tube station, and close to some listed buildings. They've got the Fulham Town Centre here on the south side in orange, and several buildings of merit as well. This is an aerial shot showing the site highlighted in red. You can see to the right the grounds of the Chelsea Football Club, so it's in close proximity. And this is what's proposed. This image on the top left is something that's been submitted to show what the scale of the event would be, and you can see the 3 images surrounding that are what's there at the moment. And essentially, it's a burger stall in a tent. No objections in principle. Design have no objections to it. It's a temporary stall and be removed when they're not trading. Highways have no objection. There was an objection from Transport for London, but that objection has been mitigated because the concerns are about conflict between traffic and pedestrians, but the stall would not operate unless the road was closed, so that means that negates that concern. Also, as I mentioned, there have been 2 previous planning permissions temporary on this site, and it's given us an opportunity to review the activities for those permissions, and there have been no complaints whilst they were in operation. So our noise team have no objections. Yeah, we've attached conditions to ensure that this would only operate 3 hours and 2 hours after a match. And there's service and refuse plans secured by condition, and condition making sure this stall is removed, plus no music. So all that's secured by conditions. Okay, and so we're recommending approval.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for officers? No questions? Okay, then we can move on to voting. Firstly, we'll vote on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, and that is on page 80. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Souslus.
For.
Councillor Pascu-Touberay.
For.
And I'll also be voting for. Now we move on to recommendation 2, which is also on page 80. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Souslus.
For.
Councillor Pascu-Touberay. And I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for attending or watching tonight's meeting. The draft minutes will be published on the website shortly, and they'll be formally approved at the next meeting, which is on the 14th of January 2025. If you have any questions concerning the applications in the meantime, please contact the case officer in the report. Thank you very much.